Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Blazing Bishop Breakdowns. I am your host, Liam Murphy. Today we're going to be looking at actually a part 2 video where previously we looked at a video of my 20 favorite checkmate patterns. A reminder that being introduced to the checkmate patterns is helpful so that you can find them in your own games. And in that video, we looked at really some checkmate in ones, just showing you what the pattern is, showing you how it works. Today, we're going to be looking at more of a real life example of those checkmate patterns where most of these checkmates are checkmates in twos or longer. And a lot of them are taken from famous games or the game where the mate itself was named. So again, we're going to be going in alphabetical order. And first, we're going to be looking at Anastasias Mate. For all of these mates, I would recommend you pause the video and try to find the answer yourself. Whatever side is on the bottom is going to be their turn to move. So in this case, the white pieces are on the bottom, so it's white's turn to move. And it's a mate in 2 here. So I hope you found queen takes h7, sacrificing your queen. The king must take the queen. And then rook to h5 is checkmate, where the knight is doing a job, keeping the king on the edge. The pawn is interfering with the king running away, and the rook delivers the checkmate. The next mate we have here is Anderson's mate, and this one is hard. It is a checkmate in 4. So again, pause your video if you need help. It's white's turn to move. Here, the checkmate move begins with knight to e7 check. The queen must take, or it could go to h8, but then it'd be checkmate even faster because the queen would take the rook. So slowest way to be checkmated by black is to take the knight. And then white sacrifices their queen. Queen takes h7. The king must capture the queen. And then rook h5, where the pawn is pinned to the king. So the pawn is not allowed to capture the rook. And this bishop is attacking these long diagonals here. So king g8 is the only move. And then rook h8 is the checkmate where a diagonal piece keeps the rook safe. So it is Anderson's mate there. The next mate we have here is the Arabian Mate. Again, a mate in 2 here. It's black's turn to move because the black pieces are on the bottom. The first move for black is queen takes h2, sacrificing your queen. The rook must take back. And then rook to g1. The knight keeps the rook safe. The rook delivers the checkmate. And that is all. The king cannot capture or run to g2 and cannot run to h2 because of the piece. The next mate we have here, a simple back rank mate, just a mate in 2 here. Rook to c8 check, checking the king. The rook must take back, and then rook takes c8 delivers the checkmate. Next mate we have here is the knight and bishop mate. This would be showing you kind of how this pattern works out in a real life game. The bishop is attacking c8, preventing the king from running here. And so white's move would be knight a6. The only move for the black king is to run to the corner with king a8. And now the bishop doesn't need to attack these squares anymore. So bishop c6 delivers the checkmate, where these squares are being attacked by the king and bishop. And the knight attacks b8 for the checkmate. The next mate we have here is Blackburn's mate. Again, pause the video if you need some time, but the quickest way to mate is queen takes h3, sacrificing your queen. The pawn must take back, and then bishop takes e4 delivers the checkmate, where the 3 minor pieces are the pieces that deliver the checkmate in this position. Here we have the blind swine mate, kind of a way this could work in a real life game. It would be rook takes g7, check. The king must run to h8. And then bringing your other rook up to the 7th rank. These are 2 rooks on the 7th rank called pigs, because they can just capture everything. Nom nom nom. Slowest way for black to be checkmated here would be either to interfere with these rooks or throw in the spite check. They all result in the same thing, so we'll just say knight d7. The c rook captures the knight, and then there's nothing black can do. Literally any move, it does not matter. It's a mate in 2. We'll just give him queen a7, and then white will check the king. The king must run to g8, and then you bring your D rook to G7 to deliver the checkmate, where these squares are all attacked by the rooks, and then your knight is doing a key job attacking F8 here. Next mate we have here, one of my favorite mates for sure, is Boden's Mate. Here, the move for black to deliver Boden's Mate would be queen takes C3, check. The pawn must take back the queen, and then your dark squared bishop comes to A3 to deliver Boden's Mate. This is why I call it the scissors mate, because the bishops are working like this on crisscrosses, and super cool mate when you get this in the game. Next mate we have here is the corner mate. Kind of a way this could work in the game would be to sacrifice your queen here. Queen takes F8, check. The bishop must take back, and then knight to F7 is the checkmate, where the rook attacks the G file and the knight attacks the king there. Next mate we have here, another mate that happens quite a bit in games and is really cool when you get it, is Damiano's Mate. And the way you could set this one up would be rook H8, sacrificing your rook. The king must take the rook, and then bringing your other rook to H1 check. The king goes to G8, and then again, rook H8, the king must capture, and then again, queen H1, the king must go to G8, and then finally, queen H7 delivers the checkmate, where the pawn keeps the queen safe. So the two rooks were in the way of the queen, and so you sacrifice them with checks to get them out of the way. Next mate we have here is the double bishop mate. Different than Boden's Mate in the sense that the bishops are not on crisscrosses, but now they are both attacking the same direction. And mate in 2 here, I hope you saw, first move is to sacrifice your queen. Queen takes F3, check. The rook must take back, and then bishop takes F3, where this bishop is attacking the dark squares, and your light squared bishop is attacking the light squares. The next mate we have here is the Dovetail Mate, and this mate is actually from a position that I modified from one of the games I played. This was actually seen in the game where Can the Blazing Bishop Win $1,000? Hope you watched that video. So the answer to here would be queen F7 check. The king must run to H6. Queen F8 check. The king must run to G5. And then queen F4 delivers the Dovetail Mate, where the rook keeps the queen safe, and black's own pieces interfere with the king running away. The next mate we have here, I always have trouble pronouncing this one. I'll say the Paulette Mate. Could be Paulette, I'm not really sure. But the quickest way to do this one would be rook G1, checking the king, sacrificing your rook because the black bishop will take. But notice that the bishop was interfering with the queen from seeing G2. And then your queen comes over to G2, where your rook attacks these squares, your queen attacks these squares, and the bishop takes away H7 for the checkmate. Next mate we have here is Greco's Mate, a mate in 3 for black. And the answer is knight G3 check. The pawn must take back. And then either the rook or the queen comes to H4. We'll do the queen because it's cooler to sacrifice your queen. The pawn must take the queen. And then rook takes H4, delivers the checkmate. Next mate we have here is the hook mate. Very cool mate here where you get this one in the game via sacrifice. And the answer is white to mate in 3. Queen takes C8, check. The king must capture the queen. Rook comes to E8, check. The king can either go to D7 or B7. The same result will happen no matter what. We'll say B7 here. And then rook B8, where the knight keeps the rook safe. The rook attacks these squares. The knight attacks A7. The rook attacks B6. And these pawns are interfering with the king from running away. One of the last mates we have here is Ollies Mate. And white to move here, a mate in 3. Pretty common pattern to see in games here would be A6. Slowest way for black to be checkmated would be pawn to B6, stopping the queen from seeing B7. And then the queen will come to C6. And black can make any move in the position. Can't stop the queen from coming to B7 and checkmating you. We'll just do this. And then queen B7 is the checkmate. One of the last mates we have here is the Opera Mate, taking from Actually, the famous game that this is named after, which was a Paul Morphy game, and mate in 2 here for white. The answer is queen to b8, checking the king. The knight must take the queen, and then the rook comes down to d8, protected by the bishop to deliver the checkmate. Next, we have the Pillsbury Mate, which is kind of another edition of the Opera Mate. And the answer here, white to mate in 3, would be rook takes g7 check. The king runs to h8, and then super cool rook g8 check, where the bishop checks the king, the rook checks the king, so the king must capture this rook, allowing your other rook to come to g1 to deliver the checkmate. Second to last mate we have here is Reddys Mate. This one also taken from the game that this mate is named after, and the answer here, white to mate in 3, queen to d8, sacrificing your queen. The king must capture. The bishop comes to g5 for a double check. Remember, for a double check, you can't capture to get out of a double check. You can only run away your king. So the king must come to c7, or e8 would have worked. But to get Reddys Mate, we have bishop to d8, where the bishop delivers the checkmate. The rook attacks the d file. Super cool mate. And the last mate here is a smothered mate. This mate, definitely very ecstatic when you get these mates in games. Mate in 2 for white here, and the answer is queen g8, sacrificing your queen. Notice the king is not allowed to take because the bishop is protecting the queen, so the rook must take, and then knight f7 delivers the smothered mate. So if you haven't watched part 1 of this video, I recommend you do that. I hope seeing these mates in more of a game scenario helped you guys learn these patterns. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Really helps us out. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.